I want to offer a perspective on receiving psychic information and what is actually happening when we receive information from outside spiritual forces, because I think it could dispel a lot of fear and disempowerment, confusion, and potentially even some infighting that happens within the spiritual community. The perspective is that when we are receiving outside spiritual information, whether that be from our spirit guides, our higher self, deities, ancestors, etc. It is important to remember that a big portion of that is going to be our own minds making. This perspective is essentially that no outside information is going to be clear cut straight from the source. And the way that I look at it is that we are in this physical realm with physical sensations. Not to say that wherever the spiritual information is coming from isn't physical in some way, but it doesn't operate off of the same sensations and physicality that we do. So when we are receiving information from outside spiritual forces, the information is given to us in such a way that cannot be directly translated into our understanding or into our physical senses. So, what then has to happen is our senses have to interpret that information. Our imagination takes a big part in creating the sights we might see in our mind's eye, the sounds we might hear psychically, the sensations we might psychically feel, etc. Our own imagination is taking a huge part in creating and translating that. And further, our understanding of reality is filtering the information through our current understanding of reality. And this isn't to say that that can't change, because it certainly has for me in the last 10 plus years, quite a bit. If the information is filtering through specific expectations, specific belief systems, specific fears or insecurities, anything that the person has unchecked and just believes, then that information is going to filter through that lens. And that doesn't mean that that's the way that the outside spiritual force originally meant the thing. Spirit in itself is going to be a lot more adaptable and a lot more fluid than we are able to comprehend currently in this realm. So, when we're receiving information, especially because this realm is very it's more visceral and it's more concrete, or we need things to be more concrete and solid. And we are also conditioned to look at things in a categorizing this or that sort of way, rather than the reality of the situation, which is that most of reality is subjective, meaning up to that person's interpretation. When I was a child and I was being raised in a fear based religion, my spiritual experiences were filtered through the lens of outside spiritual entities are bad, are evil, are out to get me. So when I would have dreams with the spiritual entities that guide me, they would be scary. When I would have, they would show up as monsters because my imagination and my subconscious were creating monsters. When I would have spiritual experiences, it would filter through the lens of my own panic, my own fear, my own anxiety because of what was conditioned into me when I was a child. Now that I have worked through that fear and I look at these spiritual outside forces through a different lens, my imagination creates a much different picture. And when I say this, I literally mean the pictures that my imagination created in dreams when I was afraid were scary pictures and scary situations. Now that I am not afraid, my imagination creates whole different pictures, completely different. My imagination shows them differently, and my imagination also interprets and feels and experiences them in a more loving and empowering way. When I first started overcoming my fear of spiritual entities, they began by showing up as criticism, as correction, as at one point I thought it was punishment. And over the course of a few months, I slowly began to realize that the information was being given to me for loving guidance to help me get out of the criticism, judgment, and shame that I put on myself. So the information was being given to me as guidance, and my internal belief systems were turning that information, they were spinning it to go from one that is loving advice and empowerment to one that is disempowering, that is attacking, that is criticizing. Advice that was given to me as it might help you if you tried X, Y, and Z, my brain filtered that through my own inner critic and interpreted as you should be doing this. Why aren't you doing this? There's something wrong with you. You're doing this wrong. And the perspective of the same exact information can be switched that easily. Another thing that I have found that is very common in the spiritual community is that whatever you're working with, whether it be higher self, spirit guides, deities, ancestors, etc., they tend to, and I found this because it happened to me first, give us information in the best way we can comprehend it. And it doesn't matter if you use verifying things such as divination, such as pendulums or dowsing rods. It doesn't matter if you think you're correctly verifying as much as possible, because at the end of the day, they cannot sit in front of you and have a conversation with you the way that you and I would have a conversation. So what I have found for myself is that a lot of times when I was given information, and then I verified that information with some sort of divination technique, they had no other choice than to verify it in the way that I could comprehend it. And then later I find myself experiencing the same information from other perspectives and understanding, oh, it's not exactly the way that it was explained to me, because there's no possible way that this could be explained to me exactly how it is, because I'm not in that realm. And they can't be in this realm. So what started off as me going, oh, it all makes sense now. Now I have the information. Now I have the secrets to the universe, ended up with me just being more curious than ever and understanding that this information is passed down to different people in different ways in whatever way they need it and can best receive it. And this has actually been very helpful, one, for my own humbling, two, for coexisting and cooperating with others, and three, just for expanding my perspective. Because now my brain, not only for myself, retrains itself to be curious. So now I'm curious about the ways that I'm receiving information, retraining the thing that immediately wants to go to worst case scenario or criticizing myself or criticizing others. My brain is now retrained to go, what other perspective can I have? What could this actually mean? What could a more empowering perspective of this same exact information be? So it not only retrains my brain for my own empowerment and my own self, but it has also retrained my brain to be curious about other people's perspectives in a way that helps me to see patterns that I don't think I would have seen otherwise. Meaning that realizing that the labels and the words and the dogmas are just things that human beings created in order to interpret things that can't be really translated into our understanding fully. So any spiritual information that has ever been given to a human from an outside spiritual force cannot be fully translated into our reality. So all of this information is just creating its own labels and its own dogma. And for me to realize that this was happening within me as well has trained my brain so that I can listen to things that I might not have previously listened to, because it wasn't a part of my belief system, or it wasn't a part of my dogma. It wasn't a part of what I believe, like the labels, the words that we associate with, oh, that's not the thing I believe in. I don't believe in this because I'm Gnostic. I don't believe in this because I'm pagan and that's not pagan. I don't believe in this because I'm of this belief system or of this mindset, and the labels they're using are not a part of my belief system. That doesn't stop me anymore, because I understand that spirit presents information in the way we can best receive it. So now I'm able to listen to other perspectives and other interpretations. And that is not only liberating, the coolest part about it is that it allows you to see patterns. So I have found that people from vastly different spiritual traditions are often picking up on very similar things, very similar, like baseline spiritual information. There's patterns within this, and interpreting it through their own belief system, their own labeling, their own categorizations, and their own perspectives. It gets so intricate because I've even found people within the same spiritual traditions, but one of them has not checked their fear, their criticism, their anger, their self-protection based ego. So the information is coming through vastly differently then another person from the same exact spiritual tradition who has done inner work on their self-protection based ego. And so they're presenting the same information, but one is presenting it from a lens of criticism, shame, etc., and the other one is presenting it from a lens of empowerment. When I realized that spiritual information from outside forces does not come straight, we create how we interpret, both with our clear senses, our psychic senses, and with our own inner belief systems and things of this nature. It opened up the door for me to connect the dots between my own experiences and the experiences of others in a way that has provided me with some clarity, but mostly just leads to further exploration, which honestly feels pretty cool. When there's this pressure, we have this pressure to make things so solid and to really get to the bottom of things. When there's this pressure to make sure we know the actual truth, it creates this very polarizing, like, good guy, bad guy, I'm in the right, you're in the right, I'm in the wrong, you're in the wrong. And it creates this like pressure that is like 10 of wands, too much weight on your shoulders. And it's just like it's a hard energy to sit in. But when the realization that nothing can ever be so solid sets in, once you get past the fear of uncertainty, it actually just is liberating and creates like curiosity and cooperation for me. It's how I can hear people channeling information from Lucifer, Jesus, Buddha, aliens, fairies, dragons, their near death experience, their hallucinogenic, psychonautic experience, or whatever you want to call it, all different spiritual outside forces and all different spiritual experiences. I can hear them all different, and I can hear patterns within it, and I can begin associations, building associations between the different perspectives, and I can begin to discern what parts are coming from, also doing my own inner work in my own ego self-protection mechanisms and in my own making excuses and in my own biases and the information I've received, compare and contrast and hear these different experiences and perspectives and build associations and understand and discern the associations that are common ground and the things that might come from individual bias, individual, you know, need for inner healing, individual perspective. And for me, this has been when spiritual growth and consciousness expansion and personal development has really begun to take off, when I allowed myself to expand the perspective